प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्री वसति गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्रीला हरिदास ठाकुर की जय, गंगा माई की जय, जमुना माई की जय, भक्ति देवी की जय, तुलसी देवी की जय, अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। Thy Gaura Premanande, Hari Hari Bol, all glory is assembled the very Hare Krishna, all glory is assembled the very Hare Krishna, all glory is assembled the very Hare Krishna, all glory is to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga, all glory is to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, reading from Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 26, Text 11. I was told in the group 11 to 13 to do all of the further texts without purports. So, I'll go ahead with that. But we'll recite together 11 and then afterwards, does everyone have Bhagavatam with them? Maybe I'll just recite the Sanskrits for 12 and 13 then, the Sanskrit in English. Okay. Panchabhir Brahma Chaturbhir Dashabhistatha Etach Chatur Vimangshatikam Ganam Pradhanikam Viduhu Panchabhir Brahma Chaturbhir Dashabhistatha Etach Chatur Vingshatikam Ganam Pradhanikam Viduhu Panchabhir Brahma Chaturbhir Dashabhistatha Etach Chatur Vingshatikam Ganam Pradhanikam Viduhu Panchabhir Brahma Chaturbhir Dashabhistatha Etach Chatur Vimshatikam Garnam Pradhanikam Vidu Panchabhir Brahma Chaturbhir Dashabhistatha Etach Chatur Vimshatikam Ganam Nikam Viduhu Panchabhir Brahma Chatur Dashabhistatha Etach Chatur Vimsatikam Ganam Pradhanikam Viduhu. Panchabhihi, with the 5 gross elements. Panchabhihi, the 5 subtle elements. Brahma, Brahman. Chaturbhihi, the four internal senses. Dashabhihi, the 10, 5 senses for gathering knowledge and 5 organs for action. It's a long definition. Tatha, in that way. Etat, this. Chatu vimsatikam, consisting of 24 elements. Ganam, aggregate. Pradhanikam, comprising the pradhana. Viduhu, they know. Translation. The aggregate elements, namely the 5 gross elements, the 5 subtle elements, the 4 internal senses, the 5 senses for gathering knowledge, and the 5 outward organs of actions, are known as the pradhana. Purport. According to Bhagavad Gita, the sum total of the 24 elements described herein is called the Yonir Mahad Brahma. The sum total of the living entities is impregnated into this Yonir Mahad Brahma, and they are born in different forms, beginning from Brahma down to the insignificant ant. In the Srimad Bhagavatam and other Vedic literatures, the sum total of the 24 elements, pradhana, is also described as Yonir Mahad Brahma. It is the source of the birth and subsistence of all living entities. So, I'll read out the Sanskrit for text 12 and then the English, and then the Sanskrit for text 13 in the English as well, and then we will proceed. Mahabhutani panchaiva bhurapognir marunnabha tanmatrani chatavanti gandhadini matani me. Translation. There are 5 gross elements, namely earth, water, fire, air, and ether. There are also 5 subtle elements, smell, taste, color, touch, and sound. Text 13. Indriyani dashashrut tvagdrigrasana nasikaha vakkarau charanau medhram payurdashama uchyate. Translation. The senses for acquiring knowledge and the organs for action, number 10, namely the auditory sense, the sense of taste, the tactile sense, the sense of sight, the sense of smell, the active organ for speaking, the active organs for working, those for traveling, generating, and evacuating. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan tam sajivam sadvaitam savadhutam parijana sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratashe Namaha Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, today we are continuing the third canto, Srimad Bhagavatam. Especially the second half is so very famous for its philosophy, and we are continuing on in this philosophical discourse. We are continuing on in this philosophical discussion about the nature of the world, right? And it's an interestingly placed discussion. We found in the previous chapter, we found the consistent glorification of bhakti, right? Every single text almost in the previous chapter is like this hammer saying, become a devotee, associate with the devotees, right? Through devotional service you'll understand all such things, and apart from devotional understanding, well, there is nothing to be understood. This has been, if we will, the purport, the real conclusion of the previous section of Srimad Bhagavatam that we've just concluded. And then we come to this section and we hear, well, it's much more philosophical. We're hearing about pradhana, we're hearing about mahatattva, we're hearing about the karmendriyas, we're hearing about gyanendriyas, we're hearing about all sorts of things. And so there's a little bit of whiplash, but this content is still nevertheless important. As we might be familiar with, what is being described here is Sankhya philosophy, right? Sankhya, we know, means quite literally to count, right? We know Krishna has asankha incarnations, right? Uncountable incarnations. But this is not asankhya philosophy, this is Sankhya philosophy, and thus it is based on the idea of counting everything, and that's why we always find these lists, right? Whenever we hear about Sankhya philosophy, it's always lists. There are these many elements of this and this and this and this, right? And so, when we are engaging in Sankhya philosophy, we'll hear categorizations like we've just read, right? There are 5 gross elements, there are these many senses for acquiring knowledge, this many for losing them, etc., etc. And Prabhupada, he's quoted in his purport, right? What has he said? According to the Bhagavad Gita, right? According to the Bhagavad Gita, there is the sum total of the 24 elements. These 24 elements are a list that's often listed in Sankhya philosophy, right? They are this set of 20-odd elements. And of course, the list is sometimes different. Sometimes here it's composed of some elements, right? Sometimes we'll count the time factor. Other times we'll count the Paramatma. Like this, the list sometimes changes here and there. But by and large, this is a rather standard list. And I want to bring our attentions to this. And my brief apologies, today's class will be a hint philosophical. My spiritual master, once he was visiting America, right? And he was giving Srimad Bhagavatam class, and if anyone knows the classes of my spiritual master, they're always very nice pastimes, very rasik, right? But the text that he was given, right, for Srimad Bhagavatam class was, well, it was about the fatalities of accumulating too much material wealth. And so Guru Maharaj, for the whole class, just spoke on the evils of collecting too much money, right, of collecting too much gold. And Guru Maharaj, at one point, he said, some of you, I think, have come here expecting to hear some rasik katha, right? To hear some rasik pastimes of the Lord. I'm not saying, of course, that you all are expecting that. But what I am saying is how he concluded his point. Guru Maharaj, he made the point that we are simply here in Srimad Bhagavatam to comment on the texts that have been given, right? And to follow whatever mood they're carrying. So, I apologize in advance, we'll be a little bit philosophical today. So, we see here that Srila Prabhupada, he is citing the Bhagavad Gita, right? And this is interesting, right? Because we know the Bhagavad Gita very much does deal with Sankhya philosophy. Now, it's not Sankhya philosophy to the point of complexity that we find in the Srimad Bhagavatam, right? The Sankhya philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita is, there are 5 gross elements, and then there are a few subtle elements, right? There's earth, water, fire, air, ether, and then there's mind, intelligence, and false ego, right? This is the Sankhya philosophy we see in the Bhagavad Gita, right? And we see more of this developed in the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, in the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, especially, right? We see in the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, we hear about the nature of the Purusha, and we hear about the nature of Prakriti. Because it's not just when we hear about the listing of elements that we know Sankhya philosophy is there. Actually, the heart of Sankhya philosophy is when we hear about Prakriti, the material world, and we hear about the Purusha presiding over it. This is the central aspect, actually, of Sankhya philosophy. Even though the name would make us think that it's counting the elements, actually it is consciousness in matter. When we see these sort of discussions, then we know, oh, here there is discussion of Sankhya. But there's something interesting I want to point out. When we open the Bhagavad Gita, when we pop it open, what do we see in the front cover? In the front cover, we see the name Bhagavad Gita, and underneath it, in the edited edition by, all editions are edited, but the edition edited after 1983, we'll see there's a special title underneath Bhagavad Gita. It's written Devanagari. Does anyone know? Prabhu's nodding. You know? No, that was a shake. Okay. It says Gita-Upanishad, right? Now, this is interesting. Gita-Upanishad, right? Gita Upanishad, right? If we break down the Sandhi, right? So Gita-Upanishad. Now, what does this mean? Well, the Upanishads, they are very famous for belonging to, or rather being, the main point of study for one of the predominant schools of Vedic philosophy. And which school is that? Which school of Vedic philosophy, of the 6 Astic schools, which one is predisposed to the study of the Upanishads? Does anyone know? Okay, maybe, in fact, if you guess, you might get it. Tell me, let's guess some schools of Vedic thought. I'll give you a hint, it begins with V. V. Okay, it begins with Va and it rhymes with Edanta. It's Vedanta, right? So in Vedanta, we see that Vedanta is very, very much predisposed to the study of the Upanishads. In fact, this is one way of rendering the term Vedanta, right? Veda, Anta, right? Anta can mean the end, right? That's why we have like Antya Lila, right? Anta can also mean conclusion, right? So Vedanta, maybe it's the end of the Vedas, and we know the Upanishads, they are like the final section of the Shruti Shastra, right? We have the Samhitas and all such things. I've forgotten the other ones now. What is it? The Samhitas, the Brahmanas, the something in the Upanishads. Now I'm mind blanking. Anyways, but the Upanishads are the final one. It'll come back to me the moment I finish class. It always does when I forget something. I'll turn the microphone off and then I'll remember. But anyways, they're the final section of the Vedas, and so Vedanta can refer to their study. Vedanta can also refer to the Upanishads, or rather the study of the Upanishads. Why? Because it is the conclusion of the Vedas, and we know the Upanishads are the conclusive knowledge. The other levels are perhaps, well, we can say they're about the actual hymns, the actual things that must be recited. You know, we hear like this, and then svaha, svaha. All of these things are the basic prayers, right, of the Vedas. And then we hear, in the next level, we hear about the description. How should the sacrifice be performed around these prayers, right? And then next we hear what are the metaphorical dimensions of these sacrifices. And then lastly we hear the Upanishads, which are providing the philosophical understanding, which we should come to when we are engaging in Vedic sacrifice. Now the reason why I bring all of this up is now it's a little bit confusing, right? The Bhagavad Gita, it's discussing in Sankhya terms so much, right? Prakriti, Purusha, not just in chapter 13 and chapter 15. In chapter 15 we hear about the Ashvata tree, right? And as we know, Ashvata, what does it mean? It means no tomorrow, right? Shva can refer to tomorrow. A means not. And ta means existing, right? So we can think that this is referring to the tree that does not exist in tomorrow, right? Because this whole material world, it's here today and it's gone tomorrow. It's gone tomorrow for the materialist because everything they love, right, is no longer here in the following day. It's gone for the transcendentalist because by their execution of this Krishna consciousness process, they won't be here tomorrow. They'll be back home, back in the spiritual world, right? So we hear all of these things and we might think, oh, well, Sankhya is just there. But no, we hear Sankhya in the second chapter, right? Krishna, he describes the nature of the subtle body and the gross body, right? Okay, so now it's a little bit confusing because the Gita Upanishad, right? Shouldn't the Bhagavad Gita be a Vedantic text, right? If it's an Upanishad. And surely it should be, because what does Krishna say? Veda vid Vedanta krid, or it's Vedanta vid Veda krid. I always get it mixed up, right? This is what he says, right? Right before he gives all of this knowledge, right? Right before he gives all this knowledge, he says, I am the knower of the Vedas. I am the compiler of the Vedanta. So surely Krishna, he is speaking the Bhagavad Gita. Whoops. Surely he is speaking the Bhagavad Gita from the platform of a Vedantist, right? Confusing, right? Well, when we think about it, actually Krishna, he is jumping between different perspectives, right? At times he is speaking like a Sankhya philosopher. At other times he is speaking like a Vedantist. Even in chapter 13, which we can say is the most concise sort of, here we are presenting Sankhya philosophy. Even in chapter 13, he switches it around. And we start hearing discussions of jnana and jnaya, right? Because we know Arjuna, he asks 6 questions. Do we know what the 6 questions of chapter 13 are? He asks, sorry, I told there would be philosophy today, Prabhu. There is Kshetra, he asks, what is Prakriti? What is Purusha? What is Kshetra? What is Kshetragya? What is Jnana? And what is Jnaya? Right? What is the field? What is the knower of the field? What is the, if you want to say very literally for Purusha, what is the man, right? But we can say the enjoyer. What is the enjoyer and what is material nature? Prakriti and Purusha. And then what is Jnana? What is knowledge? Although what Krishna responds with is who is knowledgeable instead. And what is Jnaya? What is the object of knowledge? And Jnana and Jnaya, in the same way that I said when we hear Prakriti and Purusha, we should hear Sankhya philosophy. With Jnana and Jnaya, we should hear Vedanta. Here Vedanta is being spoken, right? So actually, we're seeing that actually Krishna does discuss Vedanta. He's discussing all varieties of it, and I promise what I'm saying is relevant to our discussion in Srimad Bhagavatam here. In fact, Krishna, he doesn't just speak with Vedanta. He doesn't just speak with Sankhya. He speaks with all sorts of things. In the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, sometimes you hear Krishna speak and you're like, what? This isn't the Krishna conscious conclusion, right? Sometimes when Krishna, he's speaking, right, he presents the yoga ladder to Arjuna and he goes right from the bottom. One of his arguments is, oh, if you engage with this, you'll be able to enjoy most fully, right? We know in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, when you reread, sometimes we miss it because Krishna only spends a few texts speaking it, right? But he says, oh, if you fight in this battlefield, then you will go to the heavenly planets and you will enjoy properly, right? If you die. And if you succeed, you'll be able to enjoy a kingdom. This isn't karma yoga, right? This is straight up sense gratification, right? Krishna is saying, go to the heavenly planets and have sense gratification, or engage in ruling the kingdom and enjoy the wealth of this kingdom, right? So forget about Sankhya and Vedanta. Krishna right here, he's just making a sense gratification argument. And so this is the nature of Shastra. This is the nature of Bhagavad Gita, right? Because in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, he's making whatever point he can in order to appeal, in order to convince the listener, right? With the argument from sense gratification, this is because Krishna, he's making different arguments for different levels of spiritual practitioner, right? The karma yogi, the karma kandi, right? And so this argument is for the karma kandi, the person who just wants sense gratification, right? So like this, Krishna, he is making this argument for all different types of people. And we see this with the Shastras, right? So you will find some Puranas where it says Shiva is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You will find this, right? But these Puranas have been written for those in Tamoguna, right? In the mode of ignorance. The Shastras, it is not that they are like some book, some set of books, and you can open them all up and they will all say the same thing. If you read them all thoroughly, you will come to the conclusion of Srimad Bhagavatam, right? But many of them, they are written with the idea that I will say something that is appealing to a certain type of person. And by saying this, this person will get pulled in to the Vedic process. And when they are pulled into the Vedic process, then they will properly engage and come to the correct conclusion. Which ultimately is what? To chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And so then, when Krishna, he's speaking about Sankhya, when he's speaking about Vedanta, he flips and he moves here and there. Why? Because he's speaking the knowledge in a way which will bring one to this highest devotional conclusion. Right? This is what he's speaking, right? He's speaking how can I give some level of understanding that can bring this individual, this person, to understand, right, the levels of reality. And so we find Srimad Bhagavatam does the same thing, right? We are not studying Sankhya philosophy here because we want to become great Sankhyaites, right? We are not studying Sankhya philosophy here because we are studying the ways in which the elements should be composed. Actually, the only reason we are studying, is so that we can better understand Krishna and that we can better understand the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. It often comes up, right? People often have this debate. When we read the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, right? Everyone says, oh, Prabhu, the earth is flat, right? And others will say, no, Prabhu, the earth is round. And others will say, flat or round, it doesn't matter, as long as you know that the sun is going around the earth. And then others will say, oh no, but Prabhu, because of relative motion, we can say the earth is going around the sun, right? I'm sure we all hear debates like this around the 5th canto. When you get to the 5th canto, I'm excited to hear the Srimad Bhagavatam classes that will come up discussing it, right? Others will say, oh, but Prabhu, the moon is further away than the sun. And then others will say, but no, Prabhu, when you see the way it's described, the moon is higher up, but it's not necessarily further away, right? We'll hear all sorts of descriptions like this. And everyone will debate, what is the message of the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam? Is the message of the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, is the message heliocentrism, that the sun is the center? Is it geocentrism, that the earth is the center, right? We hear these debates. What is the message of 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam? Actually, today, before we even get to the 5th canto, I'll resolve all of these debates. The message of the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is that Krishna is the center of the material universe, right? That Krishna is the center of the spiritual universes, that Krishna is the center of everything. Heliocentric, geocentric, actually, both are wrong. It's Krishna-centric. The whole purpose of us learning about these things is to understand that Krishna is the center of all reality, right? This is the purpose of Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is giving this message and this message alone. Actually, it's described that when Shukadev Goswami was there with Parikshit Maharaj, the demigods, they all came down. Have we heard this story before? The demigods, they all came down. And what did they do? What did they bring with them? What did they bring? Sorry? No. The demigods, they came down. And what they did is they brought Amrit, We know Amrit, the demigods, they're bringing Amrit because the demigods, they're drinking Amrit. That's how they are immortal, right? And by immortal, we mean they just live much longer than we do, right? They're always drinking Amrit, right? And so the demigods, they came down. And they came down and they heard, oh, they are speaking Srimad Bhagavatam. And so they told Shukdev Goswami. They said, Shukdev Goswami, here we have some Amrit, right? We know Garuda, he did a runner. And he once stole some Amrit from the demigods, right? And we know he dropped that bit of Amrit. And dropping that bit of Amrit on this one tree, this is the one tree that didn't die when Kaliya was infecting the section of Braj, right? That one bit of Amrit dropped, and so that tree managed to survive. So we can think, what is the power of Amrit, right? It survived this snake, right? This king of snakes, Kaliya, right? So what do these demigods say? They say, oh, okay, Parikshit Maharaj, he will die from being killed by a snake, but we have Amrit, right? So we will give Parikshit Maharaj some Amrit, and in exchange, we will give you this Amrit, you give us the Bhagavat Kathamrit. This will be our exchange. You give us Bhagavat Kathamrit, and we will give you Amrit, right? Like this, they say. And what does Shukadev Goswami do? Does he say yes? He begins to laugh, right? He laughs in their face. And he says, you want to give us Amrit, and in exchange you want to receive Bhagavat Amrit, right? What you're doing is you're comparing, right? We know very famous, like a diamond and glass shards, right? Your Amrit is like simple glass shards, and you're asking for the diamond of Bhagavat Katamrita. You think this is fair? You think this is some sort of reasonable proposal? You're calling yourself demigods, but you're simply acting like demons. So he says, go away, get out, right? So like this we can understand what is the value of Bhagavat Katamrita. Actually, Parikshit Maharaj, what did he lose? He lost nothing, right? All of these days, hearing and speaking Srimad Bhagavatam. We can all hope that we are cursed to die in 7 days and have such a conclusion, right? So in this way, we can think this. And actually, at the end, once it finished, Brahma, he was watching all of this. He watched all the other demigods do this. And when Brahma saw all of this, Brahma, he thought, amazing, right? Parikshit Maharaj, he did not die. He simply went to live fully, right, at the lotus feet of Krishna. This is the realization of our Brahma. Our Brahma, he is a devotee, right? So he is having such realizations. Other Brahmas maybe don't have such depth of realization, but our Brahma does. And in fact, what he did is he got a scale, now that Bhagavatam had been spoken. And what he did, he put on the one side of the scale, he put all of the sadhanas in the world, Jnana Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, right? All of these, Dhyana Yoga, right? Nishkama Karma Yoga, right? All of these things, and he put them on one side. And then he put hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam on the other side. And the scale broke because hearing Srimad Bhagavatam was so much heavier. So this is the value of Srimad Bhagavatam. But why is the Srimad Bhagavatam so valuable? The Srimad Bhagavatam is so valuable because it is presenting this highest conclusion, right? It is presenting this highest conclusion of what? Of honoring Krishna, of worshipping Krishna, of becoming Krishna's devotee, right? Did we not hear? For so long we were having such wonderful Srimad Bhagavatam classes, right? For the last chapter, every Srimad Bhagavatam class is wonderful. But for the last chapter, all of the classes, they were particularly wonderful because we were speaking directly about bhakti, right? But we should not think that this chapter is less wonderful. We should not think that, now we're doing boring philosophy. Now we have to hear about Gyanendriyas and Karmendriyas, and we have to hear about all the different elements. No, we shouldn't think like that. Actually, this chapter is as wonderful. It is an indirect glorification of Krishna, right? It's the finger pointing to the moon, right? We know very famously. When there is a finger pointing to the moon, sometimes the more Vedic analogy that's given is it's the branch pointing to the moon. Sometimes if the moon is very beautiful, right? And the moon is up in the air, right? We won't say, if somebody says, oh, look, the moon is very beautiful, and somebody says, where is the moon? I cannot see. You won't say, oh, the moon is up there. What you say is you say, look, see that tree and see the branch that's sticking out on the left side? Just past that branch, there is the moon, right? And then the person will look at the branch and then they see the moon. And they think, wow, how beautiful is the moon? This is how we should understand these descriptions of the material universe, right? These are branches. And we are pointed to these branches. And if we truly look at the branch for the purpose that we are pointed towards them, we will think, wow, how wonderful is Krishna, right? We will think, when we hear about this Sankhya philosophy, we will come to the conclusion of Sankhya philosophy. Do you know what is the conclusion of Sankhya philosophy? You are not this body. This is actually the conclusion of Sankhya philosophy. Because a Sankhya philosopher, they will look at all the different elements and they will say, all of this is Prakriti. But I am not Prakriti. I am Purusha, right? And when they realize this and when they think, I am Purusha, what will they do? They will no longer identify with their body. And no longer identifying with their body, then they will attain liberation. This is the path of Sankhya. Of course then, the path of the Bhagavatam is a little bit higher. We say, after realizing that we are not this body, after realizing we are Purusha, we actually realize that we are Prakriti as well. We are Prakriti because we are not the enjoyer. We are the enjoyed. Prakriti is the enjoyed. Purusha is the enjoyer. So when we realize we are the enjoyer of this material universe and thus we are controlling it, we detach from the enjoyed, right? But then we go one step higher and we realize I am to be enjoyed by Krishna. This is the true nature of the Purusha. Does this make sense? So, in this way, the Bhagavatam, it is fulfilling this knowledge of Sankhya. Actually, if you run into most Sankhya philosophers today, they are atheists, right? There are two forms of Sankhya. There's Bhagavat Sankhya and there's Nirishvara Sankhya. And Nirishvara Sankhya, this is Sankhya that is devoid of any theism. And so what these Sankhyites believe is they believe there is no Purushottama. There is no Uttama Purusha, right? There is no Supreme Purusha. There are only many Purushas floating around in this universe, right? This is what they believe. And so we can actually go into the complexity of Sankhya Yoga, and I won't, because it gets very complicated. They have these theories on how causation works, and they have all of these different debates about is the effect of something inherent in the cause, right? Stuff like this, right? So they'll have all of these different debates. We won't get into it. But basically, I want to touch quickly on this debate, because many Sankhya philosophers, they'll say there is no Purushottama. This universe is simply a collection of all of these different Purushas exploiting and experiencing material nature. Now, does this make sense? Does it make sense that the most supreme Purusha is each individual jiva? Not really. This is much better than Mayavad. In fact, the Sankhya philosophers, they have very good refutations of Mayavad, right? They will make very simple but completely compelling arguments. The Sankhya philosophers, they will say things like, well, if we are all one Atman, then when one Atman goes to sleep, all of them should go to sleep, right? Or when one Atman dies, all of them should die, right? Or they will say things like, well, I am experiencing this, but you are not experiencing this. So clearly there is some division between our Atmans. Or they will go even deeper. And what will they say? Right now, my Atma is desiring to hold this, right? But all of you aren't running up and holding this as well, right? Thus there are different desires that each one of your Atmans are expressing, right? If we were all the one same Purusha, we would all be doing the same thing like I'm doing right now. Does this make sense? But we are instead doing different things, right? Prabhu, right now, being Purusha, he is using it to move his hands around his pen, right? But Prabhu here, he is keeping his hands in his lap. If we were the same Purusha, because as we know, Purusha is the controller of material nature, then all of us, we would be doing the same thing, right? I have my phone right here. Prabhu has it holding it in his hands. That means we are different. And it doesn't just mean we are different in that we are different material energy. We are different controllers of material energy because we are, all of us in this room right now, we are controlling the material energy differently. So in this way, the Sankhya philosophers, just with common sense, they refute this Mayavad nonsense, right? That we are all one big Purusha. But they do run into an issue. And what is that issue? Their issue is that they say, oh, well, then there is these many Purushas, and there is no Supreme Purusha. And actually, there are some Sankhya philosophers, they provide the refutation for this point as well. And what is the refutation they provide? Well, they say it's very simple. If there is no one Supreme Purusha, then how did this material universe come into being? Okay? And the reason they make for that is, as we know, each of the Purushas, we are all desiring different things. And this material universe, it came into being. That means at one point, one of the Purushas desired that this material universe come into being. But if all the Purushas have different desires, that means one Purusha is defeating all the other Purushas, right? And this doesn't make sense if you say they're all equally powerful Purushas. But if you say there is a Purushottama, a Supreme Purusha, then it makes sense, because it was this Supreme Purusha who desired that Prakriti becomes manifest. Does this make sense? Philosophical argument, right? Again, I apologize profusely. I said today would be a philosophical class, right? And so the Sankhya philosophers, those who are coming to the correct conclusion that there is Purushottama, that there is a Supreme Controller, that there is a Parameshwar, what do they say? They say that the material universe exists means that at one point there is one Purusha whose desire can overrule all the other Purushas. Right? Because otherwise, you would have the case of all the Purushas, they're floating around and they all want different things. How can it be that the material universe exists? We all want different things. We're always clashing. Right? There must be a deal breaker in order for everything to begin to be manifested. Anyways, we can talk about Sankhya philosophy for a while, but we'll keep on going. So, in this sense, what do we see? We see that the Bhagavatam, it's using this philosophy of Sankhya to make this point about Krishna being supreme. And in many ways, it's using this point because Sankhya philosophy, we can say, it is the scientific knowledge of the time, right? It is the material science of its world. That's how we're understanding the elements, we're understanding how things are interacting. And so Sankhya is being used in this way, right? And so we can also understand that science can be used in this way as well. Sometimes devotees, they will think, I will prove Krishna consciousness through science, right? And this is fantastic. Please prove Krishna consciousness through science. But do not believe in Krishna consciousness because of scientific argument. Do you get what I mean? Do not think, I believe in Krishna consciousness because there are so many good historical arguments, there are so many good scientific arguments. These are arguments that we use in order to compel others, in order to break down others' resistance to the Vedic knowledge. But we believe in Krishna consciousness because of the authority of Sadhu Guru Shastra. And because of the empowering experience of the holy name. What does Krishna say in Bhagavad Gita? Does he say the Sthita Pragya, which he describes at the end of chapter 2? Does he say this person is engaged in higher consciousness? Does he say this person is engaged in higher consciousness because they've engaged in the scientific literature? No. Does he say, oh, well, they've seen all the historical arguments and thus they are in this higher level of spiritual experience? No. What does he say? Param drishtva nivartate. He has experienced the higher thing and thus he or she is on that platform, right? So we should understand that we come to this Krishna conscious conclusion because of the mercy we have received from the Vaishnavas, because of the mercy we have received from the holy name. We should be like Krishna is in the Bhagavad Gita. He is taking Sankhya philosophy and he is using it to preach, right? He is using it to establish the conclusion. And so we should do the same with science. It's not that we should think, my foundation for believing in Krishna consciousness is science. No. This is not Vedic. This is not proper, right? Science might help us, it might be conducive, but it is not the reason why we ultimately come to the conclusion. And the reason for this is not only that it is not the right foundation, but science can only get us so far, right? Science and history, how far can they get us? They are based on the senses, right? And the senses cannot capture Krishna. We hear about this in Ishopanishad, right? Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is faster than all the demigods, right? Who are in control of all our senses? The demigods are in charge of all of our senses, right? So, if Krishna is faster than all the demigods, then how can our senses capture Krishna? They can't, right? The demigods, they had to go to the milk ocean in order to communicate with Krishna in the beginning of Krishna's Leela, right? They weren't able to just run up to the spiritual world and capture it because it's beyond them, right? But Krishna, one day, he was very, very hungry, right? And Krishna, he was so hungry that he went to Mother Jashoda and he demanded to be fed. And Mother Jashoda very nicely fed him, right? But then Mother Jashoda, she saw the milk that she was preparing. It began to boil over, right? And began to boil over and fall into the fire. Actually, there's many different descriptions given why this milk boiled over. One description that's given is the milk saw Mother Jashoda feeding milk to Krishna. And seeing this milk being drunk by Krishna, the milk thought, oh wow, I will never be able to have this perfection of being fed directly onto the lotus lips of Krishna. Thus, my life is useless. And so he jumps into the fire. The milk thinks, my life is empty, my life is pointless. If Krishna is not drinking me, there is no purpose to my life. And so the milk jumps out and jumps into the fire and thinks, thus, I have no existence. There's one explanation. It's given by Hari Suri, who's a medieval commentator on the Srimad Bhagavatam. So like this, the milk jumps in. And Mother Jashoda, she runs to the milk and she sets Krishna aside. And we know Krishna, he's not having any of this. Krishna is Purushottama. He is the supreme enjoyer. And so Krishna, we know he goes and he steals the butter. And he begins to eat the butter. And then what happens, right? He runs off and Mother Jashoda, she's running after him, right? And we know, we hear in Damodarashtakam, what do we hear? We hear Krishna, he is rubbing his eyes and he is crying, right? We hear this when we sing Damodarashtakam. Sorry? Yeah. So, when we hear this in Damodarashtakam, actually what it's meaning is that Krishna, he is rubbing his eyes, right? He is rubbing his eyes so that tears will come out. Because Krishna, he is thinking. What is he thinking? He's thinking, if I have tears coming out of my eyes, right? Then Mother Jashoda, her heart will be made so soft and she'll think, oh, how can I punish my Krishna? Oh, he's crying. I don't want him to cry, right? And so what he does is he does this. And Krishna, he begins to cry. And then Mother Jashoda, she sees this. And what happens? She keeps on going, angry, chasing him. And then Krishna thinks, oh, it doesn't work. And then he starts crying for real. And then he's rubbing his eyes to get the tears out of his eyes so he can see where he's going while he's running, right? So Krishna, like this, he's running away from Mother Jashoda, right? Running away, running away. And then what do we hear in Damodarashtakam? Mother Jashoda, she captures Krishna from where? From behind. Next time we're singing Damodarashtakam, you pay attention to the word for word. You'll see all of these levels of meaning are there. And it says, she captures him from behind. What does it mean when you capture someone from behind? That means they were trying to escape. Until the very last moment, they were trying to escape. But Mother Jashoda, what happens? She captures him like that. Krishna, he is fully afraid. Krishna, he is fully trying to avoid Mother Jashoda. And until the very last second. And then what happens? Mother Jashoda, she captures him. Now what is the point of this? What is the point of what I've said? Krishna, unmoving, is too fast for the demigods to reach, right? But Krishna, running at his fastest, he cannot outrun his devotee, right? So what is the value then of these senses that the demigods have given us? What can we understand from science and history, right? We'll think, Prabhu, here is the historical evidence, like this we will think, right? But I do not worship historical evidence. I do not worship a fossil in the ground or an artifact that's been dug up by some academic somewhere. I don't worship any of these. I worship the Krishna that Srila Prabhupada sees when he has darshan of Sri Radha Gopinath. This is who I worship, or at least this is who I am hoping to one day worship. This is what I am longing for. I am longing to see that Krishna who Mother Jashoda captures, right? When all the demigods completely fail, Mother Jashoda captures this Krishna. And Mother Jashoda and those who are under the guidance of devotees like Mother Jashoda, Rupa Manjari, right? Subal, all these devotees are constantly capturing Krishna, right? And so those devotees who are in their mood, Bhakti Vinod Thakur, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, Narottam Das Thakur, our Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, right? All of these individuals, they have captured Krishna, and they can give us Krishna, not some material understanding of the world. If we go with some material understanding of the world, what will we find? We will find Paundrak. We know the pastimes of Paundrak, right? Paundrak Vasudev. He sent a letter to Krishna, and he said, I am the true Vasudev. I am the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And what happens? Everyone just laughs at him, right? Why? Because he's a fake Vasudev. He's not a real Vasudev. He is just material. He gets killed like any other demon, right? Why do we want to construct some Paundrak? We are just constructing our new Paundraks, right? Some new material copy of Krishna, right? Which material evidence has built up for us. No, spiritual evidence will show us not just Vasudev Krishna, forget Vasudev Krishna. Spiritual evidence will reveal to us Vrajanath Krishna, right? Krishna and Vraj. This is not revealed to us by material senses. Otherwise, in fact, forget about worshipping Paundrak, forget about worshipping this non-Krishna, right? We might even become sahajiyas because we think our senses can give us information about Krishna. Our senses, again, they are predominated by the demigods. Once our senses have been dominated and controlled, not by our respective material demigods, but when our senses have been dominated and controlled by Srila Prabhupada, by Rupa Goswami, by all the acharyas, by all the devotees, then we will be able to see Krishna. And then our senses become most valuable, right? But until that point, our senses can tell us nothing. And so when we speak about Sankhya, when we speak about science, when we speak about all these things, we speak only with the intent to convince those who have so much faith in material knowledge. Does that make sense? And that's why we see there's different levels of knowledge in the Vedic understanding. Firstly, there's pratyaksha, which is direct sense perception. Then there is aparoksha. No, then there's paroksha. And paroksha means to see through the eyes of another person. And what does this mean? It means when we are studying the Vedic literature, we are seeing through another person's eyes. And this is higher than pratyaksha. Pratyaksha is just our senses, right? What my hand is feeling, what my eyes are seeing, right? This is pratyaksha. Paroksha is when we see through the eyes of the others, and that's when we're hearing about the Vedic authority about the world. Aparoksha then is even higher, because aparoksha is when we truly begin to understand the nature of this world. When we hear paroksha, we're hearing about the nature of this world as the Vedic literature reveals it to us. It is not complete. It is composed of 24 elements. This is paroksha. Aparoksha is when I have this realization. But then higher than this is adhokshaja. And adhokshaja, this is knowledge of Vaikuntha. This is knowledge that there is a God. This is knowledge that there is a God and this God has form. Right? This is higher than aparoksha. And so this adhokshaja knowledge we have some understanding of. But then the highest level is aprakrita. Aprakrit knowledge, which is sometimes called divya pratyaksha, right? To emphasize that we've come full circle. And now those senses which betrayed us before are the highest authority, because we are directly perceiving Krishna. We are directly perceiving Krishna's pastimes, right? And in this sense, then our senses become perfect again, right? But in the meantime, we should not put so much trust in our senses. We should not put so much trust in material knowledge. What does material knowledge tell us, right? What does nature of this material world tell us about the spiritual world? And I will promise to conclude on this point. What does the nature of this world tell us about the spiritual world? What do we hear? In Bhagavad Gita, what does it tell us? In the spiritual world, is there any need for light? No. Very good. There's the basics of Bhagavad Gita, right? So, what does that mean? Of course, there's no sun in the spiritual world, right? There's no moon in the spiritual world, right? I mean, there's no need for effulgence. That's what Krishna says. It's self-effulgent, right? Right? No. Maybe in Vaikuntha, this is the case. But in Goloka, there is a sun and there is a moon. But why does the sun and moon exist? Exactly. In this world, we need a sun and a moon, and we need it for effulgence. We need it so that we can see. Right? We need it so that the whole world can be sustained and taken care of. But in the spiritual world, why does the sun and the moon exist? It exists so that Krishna can play with the cowherd boys, right, under the sun, and so that he can dance with the cowherd girls under the moon. This is why the sun and the moon exist in the spiritual world. We cannot translate the logic of this world onto the spiritual world. Its physics are different. I was speaking once to one of the youth, and she was studying some form of linguistics, and she said, this pastime of Krishna can't be possible because the animals start speaking. And the animals do not have the physical apparatus to speak. And I told her, of course. Of course they don't, right? But the animals in the spiritual world do not have a physical apparatus. They are not bound by the laws of physics. They are bound by the laws of Leela. So, when we hear about Sankhya and we hear about all these things are very valuable because they help our meditation of the Supreme Lord. But they are not valuable in the sense that they are the conclusion in of themselves. They are there to bring us to the conclusion, which is to surrender to Krishna and to engage in the logic of pastime. And what is the logic of pastime? The logic of pastime is Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And when we immerse ourselves in the chanting of Hare Krishna, then we immerse ourselves in the transcendental logic, the aprakrita, the divya pratyaksha knowledge of the spiritual world. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai.